Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan Sachs. Ethan, we have wrapped up 2023. We're headed into 2024. I know you are Mr. Reflective. Anything you want to start us out with on this episode?
No, I feel like I did my mushy gushy stuff last episode a little bit. I will say, as I was taking the trip down memory lane via Scryfall and 17 lands for this episode, I was just like, I went on a real journey of like, I don't know if I want. It's like I was like, this is kind of a slog. Do I really want to go through this? And then by the end of it, I was like, oh yeah, that card. Oh, so cool. I like messaged you. I was like, this episode is so fun to prepare for. So I'm back in. I'm all in on reflecting on 2023. And I think I'm going to make a bold claim here before we get into the episode. I think 2023 is the best limited year. Full stop.
No, not close. I will fight to the death on that.
Oh, this is a great year for
I
limited.
think this year was a bell curve. It like started a little slow, ramped up. It peaked with Lord of the Rings. It has like gone rapidly downhill with WoW
First
and LCI.
of all, you are
Spoilers.
atrocious at spoiling your takes for any of these kinds of episodes. Second of all, I mean, so this, I forget when this happened, that like I was talking about WoW not being one of my favorite sets, like during when the set was out, so a few months ago. But I was like, but I still think it's good. Like I don't, and someone was like, well, where would you, like, if it came out in other years, where would it be ranked? And as far as I could tell, it would have been number one, I think, in all but one, maybe two of the years of the podcast. It definitely would have been in top
wild.
two. Yeah, I would. I
think you get some recency bias there, my friend.
As I think we should, because what I've learned is that I don't think we should flashback to limited sets. I just think we should just leave them in our memories in the Smithsonian, whatever. But like, we don't need, because they'll never be what they were for us, right? Because it's people coming back to them with these preconceived notions met with people coming back to them with no notions at all. That's it.
I loved visiting Cons of Tarkir. I had my rose-colored glasses on, and it stayed rosy.
Great. Yeah, I know. You're not the person. You are. I think we often talk about how very similar we are. One of the things that we are not similar on is like, you hate change. You're like, if it was just the same as it was, I'd love it.
100%.
Yeah.
Hate change.
Loathe
change.
How about you? This is behind the curtains, behind the scenes. We're only recording this a couple days after Christmas, and we're not even in 2024. So welcome to the future, Ethan and Ben, to all of our listeners here, as it is the new year. Do you have anything to reflect on before we get into this episode?
I think, maybe reignited a passion for Vintage Cube. I fired up the old Vintage Cube yesterday, and it was fantastic. Like, we were talking about it on the episode, and like the Cube for Charity thing was coming up.
Yeah.
So I watched J-Bro a couple days ago, and then like turned on an LSV YouTube vid, and now like Cube for Charity is happening, and I've drafted the Cube a couple times, and it feels very different. It feels like a new thing to dive into, like, while also like still some old goodies there. But I think I'm in on Vintage Cube for the rest of Christmas break.
Wow, that's great news for us. Here's the thing that I want to just warn for the three people out there who who I think have this instinct, because it's not a lot of people, but I do see this happen when I stream on Magic Online, when you stream on Magic Online. There's always that one person who's like, so great to have you back on Magic Online, kid. Doesn't that person really bother you? That comment always really bothers me.
It does not at all. That person should keep living their best life. And there's also the chatter that always is like, Magic Excel, I see.
Yep. Never heard that joke before.
It's another oldie but a goodie. I mean, those people need to keep living their lives. Love having you in my chat. Welcome. You can stay away from Ethan's chat. Just come on in.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they don't need that recommendation. They figured that out for themselves. So we are going to be sending off 2023 in what is now, we can say it, a Lords of Limited tradition. This is our second year doing this. We're going to do the best worst of 2023. We've expanded, retooled, as we often do on this show, took some notes from ourselves and from our listeners last year. And we have 16, a whopping 16 categories. So this may be, I don't know, we may be starting off the year with a 3-hour episode. It's tough to say.
It's a lot of cards to talk about.
A lot of cards to talk about. 16 categories. Most of them will have a best worst or a overperformer, underperformer, whatever. Some will just have best. And they'll start off with, common removal spells, creatures, etc., moving all the way up to who knows what we might rank as our best set of 2023. Ben certainly wouldn't have spoiled his already. So we're going to get to all those categories. Excited. Ben and I have each, as we do for these kinds of episodes, we've come to the show with separate lists, so we do not know. I think, is my memory serving me correctly? Did last year we have no overlap?
I think we had very little overlap,
I
yeah?
think we had, very little to no overlap last year. We'll see how that pans out again this year. But it's a really fun way to discuss, summarize the year of Limited and see what we got coming for us in 2024. So before we get into all that good stuff, let's take care of some housekeeping things. First things first is the Patreon page. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. Of course, the show will always be free, but start 2024 off right. You got your resolution. I want to get better at Magic. I saw that scrub, that pleb Ethan, he made it to the PT. I can do it too. And I think the place to do it is to start off with giving back to the Lords of Limited Patreon to get access to the Lords of Limited Discord. Look, we had a year full of limited arena opens. We had lots of limited arena championship qualifiers, some high stakes events peppered throughout there as well. Of course, there are tons on Magic Online. Great place to get feedback in real time from like-minded, limited individuals is the Lords Limited Discord. We've got a number of other great perks as we move up the reward tier rankings. And, I'm just sort of brainstorming this now, but I think we've got some retooling to be done for the Lords of Limited Patreon reward tiers. We sort of scaled things back as I went on paternity leave, as I'm taking care of Jonah. Towards the end of next year, Jonah will be going off to daycare a few days a week. So might have some more time to get some great perks out to our patrons. So be on the lookout for that good stuff. Don't have anyone to shout out this time around because we're recording just a couple days after our other episode, but it's a great opportunity to shout out everybody in the Patreon. And thank you so much for giving back and for starting our 2024 off great.
Yeah, and just everyone that listens to the show or watches us on YouTube or comes and says hello in the streams. It all means the world to us, and we cannot say thank you enough. Show is also brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., coolstuffinc.com, where they've got cool stuff in stock, and you better do all of your 2024 shopping at coolstuffinc.com. Eyes on you, and your eyes better be on that coolstuffinc.com website making all those MTG purchases. We've got Murders at Karlov Manor coming out soon into the new year. Maybe you need to get those pre-orders locked in as soon as they go live on coolstuffinc.com. Maybe you're competing in some constructed events and you need to pick up some singles. Maybe you didn't get that magic gift you wanted for Christmas and you're going to treat yourself. It's not too late. Head on over to coolstuffinc.com and make sure that when you check out there, you use code LOL all caps. Tell them that we sent you over there. And more importantly, get 5% off your order. Also, want to shout out, we announced last week we're going to be at Pro Tour Chicago, supporting you, doing our live recording, all that. I booked my TeePublic merch. I've got my Magicians Against Data sweatshirt ordered. I've got my tee on order. I've got an updated Lords of Limited hoodie, so that this ragged old one can maybe be laid to rest. And you too should be repping some Lords of Limited swag at PT Chicago when we see you there.
Right after we finished recording the other day, I saw in our inbox a notification from TeePublic of you've got a new order or whatever. And I was like, oh, wow, how fun. We were just shouting out, getting new merch. And now I just find out that it's you.
It's totally me.
That was you.
Totally
awesome.
Me.
Great.
Order has
Love
been booked. I'm putting my money where my mouth is.
All right. Well, we have plenty, as I said, 16 categories to get through, lots of cards to discuss. I think we need not waste any more time. Let's get to the first category here. Only a best, no worst for common removal spell. I went all the way back to the start of the year, Ben. Went back to a variation on a theme, perhaps. A little bit of a shock variant, but with some extra goodies for toxic creatures. I have Hexgold Slash. This is single red. For an instant, from Phyrexia, all will be 1. Deals 2 damage to target creature. If that creature has toxic, it deals 4 damage to that creature instead. I'm getting some nods from you. Is that your pick as well?
It is not. It's on my list. I loved all of the cards I listed too much. So my process for this episode was to list all of the cards I thought were contenders and then ultimately
Wow.
select. So that made the list, but it is not the one that I picked. I chose Candy Grapple. I loved that card in Wilds of Eldraine.
Wow.
I thought it was incredible, and I rarely ever passed it. It's the 1 and a black instant speed. Target creature gets -3/-3, and if you bargained it, had that magic bargain text, creature got -5/-5 instead. It was very close between that and Torch the Tower, but one of those bargain spells was going to get the nod.
It's unfortunate for me to hear about Candy Apple because it just reminds me of that, 17 Lands started their personal data release for patrons during the format. And that's when I realized I had like a 51% win rate with Candy Grapple. So
Oh,
I had to have a bit
no.
of a divorce with that card. Hex Gold Slash really taught me about tempo, right? It was really hard to, there were a couple 5 mana, 4/4 toxic creatures in the format. Nimrazer Paladin was one. It was like a Gravedigger of sorts if you were corrupted. Just really taught you that, or didn't teach you maybe that you couldn't include those cards, but that there was a great risk in including those cards. And in perhaps 2023 being the year of our Lord, in the year of our Lord of One Drops, that Hex Gold Slash, I think, helped you steal back the play in a format where going first really mattered.
Yeah, I think Hex Gold Slash might have been the most format defining of the common
Mm-hmm.
removal spells, but it was not my favorite to cast. I also want to shout out another bargain card that is near and dear to my heart, Kellen's Lightblades. 1 and a white, deals 3
Ooh,
damage to an attacking or blocking creature, and bargain to destroy that creature instead. Love that card in Wilds of Eldraine. It was one of
fan
my
favorite
important
of
cards in my pet decks, the blue-white control deck.
yeah, fan favorite in any white based control deck in that format for sure. Okay, common creature. What do you got here for best?
I
Or I don't know.
have
I don't know how you want to do it. You got some honorable mentions?
Oh, I have several honorable mentions. We'll shout the honorable mentions out after. I think
Ah,
I think the
okay,
headliners deserve the top spot. I have a feeling we're going to be the same here.
okay.
My best common creature is Preening Champion. 2 and a blue for the 2/2 brings a 1/1 along with it. That's not yours.
It's not mine.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, Preening Champion was incredible in March of the Machine. I think a format defining card there, as well as one of the ways to combat all of the busted rares. It was power at common in a format that was quite powerful.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. In a format where people were like, "Oh, does this archetype exist not a common?" It's like doesn't matter. There's 7 non-commons in the pack, so you'll be fine. A nice preview for what play boosters might have in store for us. No, I chose another. I mean, I think you kind of have to pick for best common creature body that brings along a 1/1. However, you want that. If you want that to be Dunland Cremain as the reversey of it's a 2/2 army with a 1/1 flyer. If you want it to be Old Tech Cloud Guard, I went with an oldie. I went all the way back again to 1 for Chimney Rabble. 3 in red for a 3/3 with haste. Brings along a 1/1. Again, I think a card that, you know, shout out to 17 lands into the data. Like, I don't think I ever would have come to understanding this card as like it probably would have been as I was talking about Feet of Resistance in Cons of Tarkir 10 years ago, just sort of like my brain understood that the card was good, but my heart didn't or whatever. That's sort of how I would have felt about Chimney Rabble without, looking at the Stark game and hand win rate data for Chimney Rabble on 17 lands, but just taught me a lot about like two bodies, about cards that play both offense and defense. I think that Chimney Rabble is a card that I will remember for the better, not because of, it being fun to play with or play against, but just as what I think it taught me about how games of limited play out.
Yeah, for sure. I that made my list of biggest movers up for me. Didn't
Oh,
didn't win the top
nice.
spot, but made my list of biggest movers up. I played in the SCGK Star City Games sealed, like the 10K sealed or whatever for this in
Uh-huh.
Indianapolis, and I day two'd, and in the second draft, I was blue red and left like 3 copies of Chimney Rabble in my sideboard. Like because I was like blue red oil, and it wasn't oil synergy, and I
Yeah,
didn't really know how the format worked yet. Like not my finest moment.
that's rough. Yeah, that's rough to look back on.
But that did make my list. Also, want to shout out another card from one, Mandible Justiciar, the 1 and a white for the 2/1
Ooh.
lifelinker. And whenever another artifact ETB, it got +1/+1. Loved that card in that format.
Card was just good. Like you're like, oh, is this only good in an artifact deck? Like, no, it's just good.
Yeah. Also on the list, Contagious Vorak, the 2G 3/3 that lets you get a land for
Yeah,
the
it's
top
tough.
five.
Those green 3 mana 3/3s reminds me of Jewel Thief, where it's like, yeah, the card's good. I don't actually remember when I think about the format. I don't really think of Contagious Vorak.
Right. That's why I put Preening Champion down ultimately as my answer, because when I think March of the Machine, like
Yeah.
Preening Champion is one of the first things that comes to mind.
For worst, I have in the year of 2023 in rectangles, one of the most offensive rectangle makers out there, Brandywine Farmer.
Me too. That's
It's
mine.
yours. That's
That's
so
mine.
funny. Two in the green for a 1/1. This is from Lord of the Rings. When it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, you make a food token. Like, I should love this. I should have figured out a way to make this good. You couldn't. You
You
couldn't
couldn't.
figure out a way to make this good. This card was atrocious.
It was so bad. That was what I ended up choosing. I also put Pestilence Siphoner on the list. 1 and a black for the 1/1 flyer, Toxic 1. Like, that card baited me and so many other people, and it just wasn't good in Phyrexian we won in the context of the format.
That's got to be like, it's so much easier to come up, I think, with bad takes or like bad predictions than it is to come like, I don't remember it was really hard for me to come up with a good hot take during preview season because I just don't like, that's just not things that it's hard to find records of that, first of all, I think, but also hard to find I don't know, I just remember my bad takes way more. And similarly here, I just remember how bad Brandywine Farmer was.
Yeah, it was really atrocious. All right, moving on to common build around. We've only got bests here. It was very close between two contenders for me.
Okay.
The winner gotta be Eye of Malcator from Phyrexia All-Be-One. 2 and a blue
Yeah.
for the what was essentially a 4/4 Scry 2. Just
Yeah.
incredible.
When ETBs, you scry 2, and whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Eye of Malcator becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until end of turn. Yeah, I last minute, like minutes before recording this, I was like, oh, I don't have this. I forgot to do this category. And then when I actually just thought about it for a second, I was like, oh, there's only one winner. I'm curious to hear who the runner-up is for you.
Well, so you also have Eye of Malcator, I take it?
I do,
This
yes.
this category was created to honor Eye of Malcator. I
No,
was looking through
I
and I was
think
like,
it's
we have to
good.
talk about this card.
Yeah, yeah.
Close second for me, my boy, Lorien Revealed. 3 blue, draw 3, island cycling 1. Card is incredible.
It's not eligible. It's not a build around.
Sure it is.
No,
It
it
lets you build a
isn't.
control deck.
Get out of here. That's not. No. Rejected. Sorry.
Wow, it's my list. You can't infringe on my list.
That's fair. That's true. The judge rules. Sustained. All right. New category here. Land. Now, we didn't even talk about if this was restricted by rarity in any way.
No, I don't think so. Just best land,
Okay.
worst land.
So I'm going to go honorable mention first before I get to best. I know that's not that you think the best should deserve, but I like to
It's your
lead
list.
up,
It's your list.
build suspense. My honorable mention, Great Hall of the Citadel. Tap for
Whoa, what
colorless.
an upset.
I know. Wait, upset for honorable mention?
I mean, I thought that would be the top slot for sure for you.
Oh, yeah. I went with I gave most fun my honorable mention and most powerful the actual best. Great Hall of the Citadel was from LTR. Tap for a colorless, and you pay 1 tap. Add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast legendary spells. I will very fondly remember the couple days of you visiting me here in Pittsburgh and us, kind of figuring this deck out together, having some pretty insane runs, and then chasing that dragon ever since. But this did add an interesting layer to and uncovered, I think, the kind of green-white Legends deck that was pretty darn good in LTR.
I have a question for you. Just impromptu, let me ask you this. Do you, like, if Lord of the Rings flashed back right now, you would want to play it, right?
Yeah.
So where's your stance of outlawing all flashbacks coming from?
It's just because I will never be like, this is just as good as I remember it. It won't be. And so I would just rather it stay there's enough ways to make new permutations, like whatever, chaos or cube, that will let me enjoy cards of the past in a new way. But I don't make me go back and play old sets. That's how I feel, I think.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Do you have any honorable mentions?
I do, but I have a feeling my honorable mention is your winner. So Great Hall was my number 1.
Wow.
My honorable mention was Edgewall Inn. ETBs tapped. ETBs choose a color. Taps add a mana of the chosen color, and you can do 3 taps, sack it, return target creature that has an adventure card from your graveyard to your hand. I picked this
Yep.
card so highly.
Yeah, this card was incredible. That is my best land of 2023. Hard to imagine anything better really for limited. Like it fixes, it draws you a card in the late game. What's not to like? Sorry,
I
it
don't
draws you
think
two
other people
cards.
liked it quite as much as we did, though.
Well, more for us then.
I guess so.
My worst land of 2023 is perhaps some recency bias, but I have Promising Vein from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. This is
Ooh,
cave, taps for colorless, and you pay one tap, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. I didn't quite realize that other than this being a cave, that this was a functional reprint of Shire Terrace from Lord of the Rings. But I find this more offensive because it makes you feel like you should play this in your Caves Matter decks, which like you probably do because like it's a cave in the graveyard and it does fix, but it's so slow in a format where you just can't afford that.
yeah. My worst lane was actually Shire Terrace, which was
Yeah.
taps for colorless, one tap, sack it, search for basic land. I hadn't put together that Promising Vein was a like functional reprint of that was just a cave, but that it does explain my hatred of Promising Vein because I loathe Shire Terrace.
Well, yeah.
I hope to never run it at all costs. Somehow the fact that Promising Vein was a cave made me think like, I'm supposed to run this, and I was kind of okay with it, despite thinking that it wasn't great.
So next category is the golden egg, and we'll only have one, but it's just a way to review the golden eggs of the year. We have Dune Mover from Phyrexia, all will be one. That was the 2-1 with Toxic 1, and when it comes into play, you can search your library for a land and put it on top of your library. In Mom, we didn't come to a consensus here, Ben, for
We did
what
not.
the golden egg was. I wanted it to be Beamtown Beatstick, the treasure making equipment. You had a pitch for Nizumi Informant, the one on a black 1/1 ETBs. They discard a card. In LTR, we had Pelargir Survivor, one in a blue for a 1/3 taps out of mana of any color, spent only for instants and sorceries, and you can pay 5 in a blue, tap it to have target player mill 3 cards. And from Woe, we had an oldie but a goodie, Prophetic Prism. Enters the battlefield, draw a card, 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. And do you have an inclination of what would be eligible from LCI, even though we haven't done the 50 takes yet?
I have blocked LCI out of my memory completely. It's gone. It's dead to
Awesome.
me.
Great to hear. Good for our listeners as well. They're happy to hear it too. What did you end up choosing here, sir?
I had to give the nod to Pelargir Survivor. This card was so cool, so unique. I loved the format it was in. It just did everything you wanted to do in Lord of the Rings. It was like a body that blocked well, it wore the ring well, it fixed your mana for spells. When the game stalled out, it was occasionally a win condition. Like that came up for me once or twice. Card just does it all.
Yeah, I think Pelargir Survivor is probably the correct winner of this, but I had to shout out Beamtown Beatstick. Just a favorite card of mine from a favorite archetype of mine, spoiler, from March of the Machine that we'll talk about a little later. All right, number 6. New category here, variation on a theme. So sort of like reprint with a twist. So you think of like Virus Beetle was the one in a black ETB, they discard a card, but it was an artifact. Or Bitter Reunion was the enchantment version of Tormenting Voice that then you could pay 1, sack it to grant something haste. So sort of you can kind of get in the sandbox here a little bit. You know, we'll accept any kind of thinking outside the box answers. What were your thoughts on best variation on a theme this year, Ben?
I went through a lot of cards. There were a lot of good variations on a theme this year. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was, a theme that ran through the year. This is perhaps my winner, perhaps the only LCI card to make my list. This is Tithing Blade. One in a black for an
Oh,
artifact. When Tithing Blade enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature, variation on an edict effect, and then it has craft with creature, 4 in a black, transform to Consuming Sepulcher. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This card got the juices flowing when I saw it. I think,
it's a very
unfortunately,
double
it did not.
variation on a
Yeah,
theme, right?
double variation on a theme. Yeah, so I guess extra points there. It's like what's that game? Categories. Two
Categories,
two
yeah,
points. Yeah, got the double letter.
that's right.
But yeah, I love this card when I saw it. It unfortunately didn't pan out to quite be as good as I had hoped in the context of the format. But I do think maybe in a different format, Tithing Blade could have been what I saw for it, and I still did enjoy experimenting with it early on.
Yeah, I also have a card from LCI in this category. I chose Dusk Rose Reliquary. This is single white for an artifact. As an additional cost to cast it, sack an artifact or creature. It has Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until Duskgrow's Reliquary leaves the battlefield. I think this card is pretty awesome. Like it's a variation on a theme is Bone Splinters slash like Banishing Light, Oblivion Ring, whatever. The sort of white, exile a thing until this leaves. But pretty cool that it was color shifted too from black to white as a Bone Splinters variant. Pretty cool that I think it looked clunky, ended up playing out great because of how good cheap removal was in the format. Yeah, I enjoyed this card.
Yeah, there were several others to shout out as well. Your boy Beamtown Beatstick made my list as kind of a pickaxe variant. Blighted Burgeoning, tuna green, enchant land. Enchanted land taps for 2 of any color, and then it also brings along an incubate token. I thought that was a cool one. Maybe the best an active treason has ever been in Twisted Fealty. Tuna red for the sorcery, gain control of a creature, untap it, against haste, plus put a Wicked Roll token attached to one target creature. Like
Yeah.
just the fact that that was straight up main deckable in Wilds
So
of
was
Eldraine.
so was Ariat's Tempting Apple.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, both cool cards. Birthday Escape as well, just like variation on a cantrip, like a very
Mm-hmm.
clean draw a card, ring tempts you. There were a ton of good variations on a theme.
My honorable mention for this category was Cogwork Wrestler as the sort of like
Ooh.
flash -2/-0 thing. This was from LCI as well, single blue 1/2. But this being an artifact and also a good 1-drop, nullified 2 mana 2/1s in a big way as well. Like that card too. What's next?
Uncommon removal spells. Only one here for me. No honorable mentions. No nothing. Best removal spell. FFF, baby. Fear
Wow.
Fire Foes.
Okay.
So this was the red X spell from Lord of the Rings. Deals X damage to one target creature and does 1 damage to each other creature that player controls. This card was incredible.
Yeah, I actually don't have that on my list. Not because I think you can go a number of routes with these categories, and I like Fear Fire Foes didn't evoke anything for me when I was looking back through this.
Fear? It evoked fear?
Fire,
Terror?
yeah. But I did have an honorable mention from LTR, which was Gandalf's Sanction. 1 blue red sorcery, deal X damage to target creature where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Excess damage dealt to that creature's controller instead. Not many uncommon removal spells that are also a dex win condition.
Yeah.
That
Player
there were,
removal.
yeah, player removal as well. I chose a best that is not really the best, but I think is my favorite, as my fondest memories of the year, which is The Princess Takes Flight. 2 and a
Ooh,
white
it's a good
for a
one.
saga. Chapter 1, exile up to 1 target creature. Chapter 2, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. And then there isn't a chapter 3 because you've gotten rid of this saga somehow. Either you've picked it up with stockpiling Celebrant or sacrificed it to bargain along the way. But yeah, big fan of Princess Takes Flight. And I went in the same set. I went with my worst as well. Same color, same set. Stroke of Midnight. 2 and a white, instant, destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. There's a lot of things going on here. One is I know that you think this card is playable. And so
I do.
I wanted
You're
to
just like trying to hammer home that it is not playable.
just want to poke you with that a little bit. I just really like, these Kasmina's transmutations in sheep's clothing, whatever they are, however we want to repackage the kill a thing, they get a 1/1. The 1/1 is always better than you think. And in a format with bargain and rolls, it was way better. I just don't think you could afford to give your opponent a 1/1.
Yeah, that's fair. I went with worst, as in this card is the worst. Why does it do this thing for my worst
Of course
uncommon
you
removal
did.
spell? I gave this award to Shieldred's Edict. 1 and a black for the instant from Phyrexia all be 1. You choose one. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, or each opponent sacrifices a creature token, or each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker. Why does it need that third line of text? My planeswalkers in Phyrexia all be 1. Like, my opponents always had this card. Anytime I managed to draft a planeswalker, happened to me in sealed, I was running a cost. Like, my opponents all had Shieldred's Edicts. Why does it need that last line of text? Why does this need to make me sacrifice a planeswalker? I have a cool card. I want to play with my cool card. Thank you very much, Wizards of the Coast.
And I'm guessing that every time you had this card, your opponent never had a planeswalker.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were also unlucky in that respect.
Exactly. You get it. It's the worst.
That's the worst. Uncommon creature. This was the only category, I think, where as I was going along, I was like, well, could be that, could be that. And then when I got to this card, I was like, oh, it's obviously this.
Yeah,
The
we have the same one here.
the card that I literally think I was just I had a friend of mine was in town last week and we were talking about I forget what he said about like what he thought the best card to pick was in this format. I was like, oh, I think it's Virtue. Like the Black Virtue is like by 17 lands. I was like, no, the best card to back one, pick one in Wilds of Eldraine, no Kappa, is Imidane's Recruiter.
Yeah, I got mine out as well, begrudgingly. I owe it several apologies. Imidane's Recruiter is great. It's 2 and a red for the 2/2, and when it ETBs, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste. And it's also got the Adventure for 4 and a white to make 2/2/2s with Vigilance. It's just army in a can. This card does it all.
Yeah, really, really does. Worst, again, I also have, I think Wilds of Eldraine perhaps might be my most represented set here. Worst uncommon creature, Knight of Doves. 2 and a white for a 1/3. Human Knight, whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Really thought this enchantments to the graveyard thing might happen. I have to imagine we'll be chatting about a little black cat later on down the list, Ben, perhaps? Oh, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Looks like
We
we
will.
will. And yeah, this was the uncommon version of that and just did not get there.
Yeah, I have a couple good ones for worst uncommon creature, I think. The one that I ended up giving the award to was Legolas Counter of Kills. Two blue green for the 2/3 with reach, and whenever you scry, if it's tapped, you can untap it, do this only once each turn, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Legolas. You're shocked?
No. So behind the scenes, this was the one category I wanted to eliminate because I felt like my answer to this was kind of like, how are you describing it in our chat? You said it was like sort of like by the books or whatever.
And I just felt like it was checking a box.
Checking
I
a
didn't feel
box.
passionate about my answer at all.
That was the card I had picked for this category when I was like, I don't really like this is just a bad uncommon creature. I don't feel any emotions about it.
But I think it was like a discussion card for the community. Like, why did this fall through the cracks? Like, this was just like, I guess, a nod to the movies, but so many of the other cards were so cool in Lord of the Rings, and Legolas and Gimli just got shafted so hard. It was just very odd. But I think the one that it was close with, this is actually maybe even a better talking point, is Phyrexian Censor. 2 and a white for the 3/3. Each player can't cast more than one non-Phyrexian spell each turn, and non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Like this hosing battles and that whole interaction and like not remembering it or playing it pre-combat and then like going to flip your battle and then your battle didn't flip. Yeah, this card just led to so many feel bads. I think just a very poorly designed card in a set with battles and probably should not have existed or should have existed differently.
Yeah, I agree. But whatever, put it in make it a box topper. I don't know. Just don't put it in limited.
Yeah, it's very odd. I have some more creatures to shout out though. I've got a list.
Yes,
so, sir. Others that were in consideration for best for me, Aomer the Rittermark. I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was the one where I got to that one and I was like, oh, this has to be it. And then alphabetically, then once I got to Imidane's, I was like, oh, never mind.
That was also the journey that I went on. But Aomer from Lord of the Rings, the 5/4 haste, and whenever it attacks, you control the creature with the greatest power, which was always Aomer.
Remember when we were like, oh, it's like Chimney Rabble, but 1 mana more. Why?
I do remember.
Why did we think that was bad?
I don't know. It took me a while too, like longer than I would have liked. Like losing to it several times, and I was like, my opponents had Aomer at the right time. That was so lucky of them. And then I was like, oh no, this card's just actually great.
The right time being any turn.
Anytime, yeah. Also want to shout out Norn's Inquisitor from March of the Machine. 1 and a white for the 1/1. When it ETB'd, you made an incubator token 2, and then you could flip it up into a 3/3, and it gave all your incubators +1/+1. The card was incredible. And also want to shout out Bilbo Retired Burglar from Lord of the Rings, the 1 blue-red for the 1/3. And whenever it hit your opponent, you made a treasure. Just an incredible ring bearer. It could tempt itself when it came in, tempted something when it left. Like it was double temps on one card. Just incredible. There were a lot of good uncommon creatures this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you shouted out Bilbo. I didn't have a spot to shout out Bilbo or Frodo from that set, and those are two cards I have a lot of fond memories of.
Okay, I also have 2 more, 2 favorites.
Yeah.
There's some great uncommon
You don't have to
creatures.
be sheepish. about this.
Well, I feel like this is like kind of we're supposed to be picking a best and a worst, and it's hard for me to choose among my children.
Yeah.
You're gonna appreciate one of my favorites. I thought we needed a place to shout out Tiller of Flesh, 3 and a white from March the Machine for the 2/4.
Siege
Whenever you
at
cast
home.
yeah, whenever you cast a spell that targets one or more permanents, you incubate 2. You showed me the light on that card, and once you did, I loved playing with it.
Black white
Loved playing with
control
it.
with
Black
Chromos
white
Seed Shark.
50% win rate, 17 lands, baby.
Taste it.
And another one, Samwise the Stout-Hearted, 1 and a white from Lord of the Rings for the 2/1 with Flash. When ETBs, choose up to 1 target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Return it to your hand, and the ring tempts you. My boy, making a run in Vintage Cube.
Yeah. Juggling Samwises, anyone? Just turbo ring tempting?
The card was great.
Yeah, very, very fun. All right, next up, we've got Uncommon Build Around.
So many cards on this list, too.
So many cards on this list. My honorable mention for best is Calamitous Cave-In, 3 and a red for sorcery. Deals X damage to each creature in each planeswalker, where X is the number of caves you control plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard. My last draft of LCI was in paper. It was at a brewery, do a like local Pittsburgh crew. We hop around to different breweries and draft during the week. I got a deck with 11 caves, double Calamitous Cave-In, double Cave Mole Drifter. I played Spelunking. Like, never had so many people be like, well, never seen that card cast before. Never seen that card flipped before. And Calamitous Cave-In was excellent. Went on a real journey of like, Caves isn't a deck to Caves is like the only thing I want to do in the format, basically.
Yeah, card checks out. That was you said an honorable mention.
It's my honorable mention. My best, Sweet Candy Baby, Knight of the Sweet's Revenge from Wilds of Eldraine. 3 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you make a food. Foods you control have tap, add a green, and you can pay 5 green, sack the enchantment to have creatures you control get plus X until end of turn, where X is the number of foods you control. Activate only as a sorcery.
Yeah, card is great. That made my list, but it is not my number one. My number one has to go to the Bath song. There's just no consideration for anything else. 3 and a blue for the Saga. Chapter 1, draw 2, discard. Chapter 2, draw 2, discard. Chapter 3, you can shuffle in any number of cards from your graveyard, and then you sacrifice the Bath song, add blue. And it was always just a pleasant little surprise getting that blue at the end. I just forgot it was coming.
Yeah, I thought you might have forgotten it just now in trying to tell the card from memory, because you would always just be like, all right, cool, shuffle in these cards. I'm not going to deck. Oh, where'd this blue mana come from?
Oh, blue. Oh, this card's so busted.
Yeah.
Like, that was always the reaction.
Yeah,
Every time I get 2 mana, oh my god, this card's more incredible than I remembered.
Okay, well, what are your honorable mentions, though?
My honorable mentions, so many. So Knight of the Sweet's Revenge made the cut. Collector's Vault from Wilds of Eldraine, the 2 mana artifact. Collector's Vault was a lifestyle in that blue-white control deck. It let you loot, and then gave you a treasure token left over. Princess Takes Flight from earlier for you. Made my list as a build around. Really loved Fiery Inscription from Lord of the Rings, the 2 and a red enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it dealt 2 damage to the opponent, and whenever it ETB'd, the ring tempts you. And then Gandalf's Sanction on the list as well from Lord of the Rings.
Nice. I don't even have an honorable mention. I just like put a worst and then was like, or maybe it's this. Again, alphabetically, you can see them. I think I'm going to land on, I could dunk on Charade and blue-white tap from Wilds of Eldraine, but I'm not going to. I'm going to shout out perhaps a lesser obvious offensive uncommon build around, which is Urabrask's Anointer. This is 3 and a red for a 4/2. So it's from Phyrexia All Be One. When it ETBs, deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of permanents you control with oil counters on them. Seems great, right? It seems like it's like Chupacabra Echo. It's the 4 mana, comes into play, kills a thing, payoff for a mechanic. The problem is that these cards, especially the ones that are like among the things you control, there was Oil Gorger Troll that just needed you to have oil somewhere, and then you got to draw a card in addition to gaining 3 life when it came into play. But for this card, there's tension with, you then don't want to trade off anything in play in a format where like you're gonna need to trade off your cards. That's what the whole, like, get on board, trade off your stuff. That's what that format was really about. And a card that incentivized you to not do that was really dangerous.
Yeah. Worst uncommon build around for me, I think just because it felt like a bait and switch or a bat and switch maybe, was Bat Colony. 2 and
Yeah.
white from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Like, this card looked so sweet until you had it in your caves deck and you were like, oh, like I have to have a white cave and an untapped cave to be able to cast this on turn 3 for 3 bats. Like, it was much harder to get 3 bats on curve than it you would have initially thought. And then past turn 3 was not great. And then the +1/+1 counter for future caves just wasn't quite enough
Yeah.
to incentivize you to want to build around it. You really needed Bat Colony plus caves plus ways to pick up Bat Colony, like the 3/1 dog, that the mischievous pup that could return Bat Colony to your hand. Then it was worth it. But it just felt like a bad bait and switch on the build arounds there.
I agree. All right, we've lumped rares and mythics into one category here. I'm curious to see. I guess I'm not that curious because I would guess, knowing you, I would guess that you have chosen best to mean like busted and worst to also mean busted.
Yes, I have. But worst is hatred for me for the rares and mythics category.
So for best, I'm going to be positive here. Just think fondly about a card that I'm going to remember from 2023 quite a bit. Throne of the Grim Captain. I loved this card. I loved building
Ooh.
around it. It found me quite a lot. This is a 2 mana for an artifact. Taps to mill 2 cards, and then it crafts with a Dino, Merfolk, Pirate, and Vampire plus 4 mana, and flips into the Grim Captain, Menace, Trample, Lifelink, Hexproof, 7/7. When it attacks, each opponent sacks a non-land permanent. Then you can put an exiled creature card used to craft the Grim Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. Card of sweet.
Card is sweet. I never flipped it. I tried a couple times, never quite got there. Had a couple decks that could do it, but never did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
My best, I've got a holy trinity here in honor of you. Gruff Triplets, Fawnsbane Troll, the Goose Mother.
That's the
those
that's
rares,
the pro
those 3 rares
tour.
are going to live in my brain rent free for the rest of my life. I love those cards. I am very happy that they were awesome for you and got you on the PT.
Yeah, 3 green cards in a pool with like truly no green cards.
No green cards.
You
No green cards.
couldn't make it up. Yeah. I love that. My worst in this category is Sunfall. And honestly, like there were a lot of sweepers that I wanted to pick here, but sweepers in a set with battles, which is like you're showcasing this brand new card type that encourages you to get on board and attack things. Putting sweepers in those sets is just mega feel bad. So this is 3 white for a sorcery. Exile all creatures, then incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. So not only is it a mega feel bad sweeper because you're punishing people for doing what the format tells them to do, but then the person who casts a sweeper gets to affect the board first with a giant incubate token.
There were a lot of cards like this. So that
Yeah.
made my list, as well as White Sun's Twilight was
Yep.
in the same vein. I gave the nod to worst rare and mythic, though, Unstable Glyph Bridge. I hate that card with a fiery passion. That's from Lost. So I guess 2 Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards. Actually, I've got some shout outs for hot takes from Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards as well. But Unstable Glyph Bridge was 3 white to destroy everything except a creature power 2 or less, I think, from you and the opponent. You got to choose the opponent's creature that they were left with. And then you could craft it into a 5/3 flyer that says your opponent doesn't get to play magic. Like, they have to choose whether to attack you or play spells. Just not remotely close to a fair Magic the Gathering card.
All right, well, let's get to those hot takes during preview season. Like I said, these were hard for me to come up with. I think my best hot take from preview season was nailing how good Hopeless Nightmare was going to be. And actually, if you sort data by game and hand win rate among top users on 17 lands, Hopeless Nightmare is ahead of Candy Grapple, which I called like week 2 or something. So not preview season hot take, but yeah. Hopeless Nightmare was the single black enchantment. ETB, opponent discards a card, they lose 2 life. When it leaves the battlefield, you scry 2 and you can pay 2 and a black to sacrifice it. Card was awesome. And also awesome that, like we talked about, sometimes it wouldn't actually be right for you to include it in your deck. And that's pretty cool too.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I didn't play many Hopeless Nightmares in Wilds of Eldraine. Like, Wilds of Eldraine was a really good draft format. It was.
Yeah.
It was a very good draft format.
We were a little hard on it, I think, at the time.
Well, yeah, just because it came after Lord of the Rings, which was such a banger. But I didn't play many Hopeless Nightmares because I didn't draft the format in such a way as to make Hopeless Nightmare a good card for me, but like certainly understood how powerful it was and that you could go down that route.
Yeah.
My best hot take during preview season, Gandalf's Sanction is Zenith Flare, baby.
That
Gandalf's
was a
Sanction is
good
Zenith Flare.
take.
It was a great take. That's kind of how it
Yeah.
played out. That was a
Not
deck
as
you could
oppressive, but yeah.
not as impressive, but
But
felt similarly. A couple other honorable mentions from LCI that stood out in my memory: Twists and Turns, Free Real Estate. Yeah, like that
eh,
the 1 mana was worth it when we argued about that card, as well as I do think this one definitely good. Explorer's Cache, Anthem for your team. Just an anthem for your team.
so what I'm learning is I just have to make way more wild
Yeah, you
claims.
just need to make way more wild claims. Yeah, you gotta log them on Twitter. I
Yeah,
just went back through my Twitter account and, and looked through my Twitter. It's easy to find the good hot takes and the bad takes. You just got to get them on record.
that's very good. My worst take during preview season, I'm gonna go away from Wilds of Eldraine. I have here as an honorable mention, misunderstanding Bargain, that like thought Bargain was downside, but ended up being that like Bargain was actually upside on cards. Hard to know that. But I think my actual worst take was grading all of the land cyclers from LTR the same, basically.
Ooh,
And
as March of the Machine.
and I grading them the same as each other.
Oh, right.
And they were all mid. Like I think maybe we gave Lorien Revealed a C plus, but the rest were C's, and it's just not true. Like they're not all equal. There's like a pretty like it's Lorien Revealed, then like clear at the top, then black and green, then big gap, red and white.
Yeah. Hard to know that without having played the format, though, first.
Yeah, I think so.
My winner for the worst hot take bring preview season was Warehouse Tabby as the best black common in Wilds of Eldraine. That's the single
There's the
black
black
1/1.
cat. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the black cat. I was picturing all the rats on the card. That was why you saw the puzzlement on my face when you mentioned the cat, but I forgot the card was actually a cat. Whenever an enchantment goes to the graveyard, you make a 1/1 rat that can't block, and it could get Death Touch. That was not remotely close to even a good black common in WoW, much less the best black common. So
Yeah.
a couple others to shout out. I have a lot of bad takes on record as well. Treasures triggering Descend when you had to go back on our episode that we recorded and like cut out like 5 minutes of me talking about treasure tokens going to be triggering Descend on your turn. That was not a great one.
That's very funny. Yep. Okay.
Had Volt Charge ahead of Hex Gold Slash in the top red commons in Phyrexia All Be One during the crash course. That just looks laughably bad now when you look back at it. Hot take Bola Slinger as the top white common in March of the Machine, the 3 and white 2/2 with backup 1 that had the Hammer Skull effect where you could tap down an attacker. Also looks laughably bad after playing March of the Machine. And lastly, from Twitter, June 3rd, 2023, I tweeted about Galadrim Bow from Lord of the Rings. Someone talked me off the equipment ledge because this looks busted to me.
I couldn't even tell you what that card does.
It's like 2 and a green for a flash equipment that gives a creature +1/+2 in reach or something like that.
Does it like auto equip or something?
It autos equip. Yeah, it auto equips. Yeah. One of ETBs.
Are you finally done with that? Or are you
I
still
think I'm
gonna
I think I'm done with equipment. Yeah, I think Galadrim Bow being bad finally made me see the light about equipment.
Let's move on to category number 12, card that surprised you the most. This took me an embarrassingly long time, I think, to get on board. My biggest mover up was March from the Black Gate from Lord of the Rings. 1 and a
Ooh.
black enchantment. When it enters the battlefield and whenever an army you control attacks, a mass orcs 1. We argued about this a lot in the crash course. I just thought, up front, this is just a 2 mana 1/1. Like, that's bad. But there is downside to this card for sure. But the upside is you win. It just
Right.
snowballs so hard.
Yeah, upside far outweighs the downside. My biggest mover up, I guess more LCI cards, got to be Atali's Favor. I was just
Yeah.
so woefully wrong on this card. 2 and a red, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and trample, and then you discover 3.
Yeah, that's
Just
a
took
good one.
a long time to see the light. Bunch of other cards to shout out: Chimney Rabble, Afara's Dispersal. I thought needed a
Yep.
mention. 2 and a blue for the instant, return something to its owner's hand, and if it was an attacking creature, you could cast it for a single blue. That card was incredible.
Tempo.
To tempo. All of the instant speed convoke in March of the Machine, like just kind of realizing that I'd never played with instant speed convoke spells before and how
Yeah.
powerful and how busted those were and moving those up as a result. Young hero roll tokens from Wilds of Eldraine, like thought that was the worst going in, and it was actually far and away, I think, the best style along with Wicked.
That's a good shout.
And then Ginger Brute as well. I didn't believe the little guy could do it twice in a row, and he definitely did.
Wow. Yeah. The card that surprised me the most in terms of mover down, I have another black uncommon, Lord Skitter's Butcher. 2 and a
Ooh, yeah,
black
that's a
for a
good shout.
2/3. When it enters the battlefield, choose one, make a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. You can sack another creature if you do try to, then draw a card. Or creatures you control gain menace until end of turn. Thought this card was nuts. Thought this was going to be the best black uncommon. The modality here is huge. Like, this was more often than not just the same / sometimes not as good as Voracious Vermin, the common 2 and a black 2/1 that grew and came with a rat. Like, this card just didn't really matter that much.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. Biggest mover down for me, maybe this is just because it's stuck in my brain, but spring-loaded saw blades from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. The 1 and a white flash, it deals 5 damage to target attacking creature, and then you can craft it into a limousine that is a 5/5. I just was picking this card way too highly, and it just didn't quite fit in every white deck. You needed a very specific type of deck, and so I moved it down in my pick order and saw my win rate increase, I think, as a result of just literally adjusting on that one card, as well as Inverted Iceberg, which was another one on the list for consideration, which is way too high on those. Also, I mean, we're going to talk about these a little bit later, I think, but moving down on battles in March of the Machine as well came in super hot and moved down on those, I think, over the course of the format.
There's such a spread. I mean, it sounds like we'll talk about it when we get to mechanic, maybe, but like, it's such a hard card type to design, from like, it doesn't matter to it makes
Totally
your life
broken.
total 4 or 5.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find that sweet spot of like a card that's impactful but not too impactful, you know?
Right.
Next up, we have Reprint. This is I'll put my honorable mention as Ginger Brute,
Okay.
but it's clearly the companions for March of the Machine.
That's what I've got as well as my answer. I was like thinking, and I was like scrolling through individual cards, and I was like, oh, this is so easy.
Yeah.
So easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
The companions made that format, like however good that format was going to be, like easily bumped it up like a whole letter grade or like a half a letter grade or something.
Yeah. They're so fun. Companions are so fun. It's such a shame that they're so broken for constructed, because they're really cool for limited.
Super cool for limited, yeah. Moving on to worst reprint. Conversely, the Enchanting Tales in Wilds of Eldraine.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a nice
like,
yin to
just
the yang.
A wasted slot per pack for the most part, other than like Hatching Plans and a couple others.
Yeah, that's true. You've already sort of shouted this out. My worst reprint is Volt Charge. Like, just embarrassing that it went from a card like, our memory of Volt Charge was so good, 2 in a red, deal 3 plus proliferate. No, this card is not even close. I don't even think this was top 4 red commons in the set. Like, just not that good. Really,
just
a real fall from grace as a reprint.
The other one that I want to shout out is Shieldred the Apocalypse being included in Phyrexia Obi-Wan. Like, why did they put those Praetors? Like, it just confused everyone. Like, my opponent played one against me in the pre-release, and I was like, what is happening right now? And then like they were like, no, these are legal. And then like when you play against Shieldred the Apocalypse, you're just like super tilted because it's not even supposed to be in the format, but it is. Like, why did they do that? That was awful.
Yeah. You're like, why am I back in DMU again? All right. New category here. Best worst mechanic. We
gotta be the same here, right?
For best and worst?
No, well, maybe not for worst, but I would imagine we are the same for the best. This is a slam dunk for me.
What is it?
It's got to be ring tempting in Lord of the Rings.
That is my best as well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think it is close to close, particularly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else might have I mean, I don't know if this is a universal best mechanic of the year, though.
Among limited players, I think
I'm,
if you are a limited aficionado, it is very hard to not love ring tempting. It was
yeah.
just so well designed, so well balanced. I
And,
mean, that's one of the things that I was like finding as I was doing this. I mean, I've kind of already given away that Lord of the Rings is my set of the year, but it's because I loved playing with so many of the cards like that
yeah.
were in Lord of the Rings. Like if you look at my favorites, like it's there's cards from Lord of the Rings just deep everywhere on this list. And I had to make some concessions to try to get cards in from other formats. And just I could have made a list of all Lord of the Rings cards for my favorite
I
cards
didn't
for each
realize. I
category.
mean, I knew that LTR was going to be your favorite set of the year. I didn't realize you had such a love affair with it.
Yeah, it was my favorite by a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I think certainly my favorite set since Dominaria United, and
Yeah.
I might like it better than Dominaria United. It's very
Wow.
good for me.
Wow. Yeah, I have ring tempt as well. I think just a great mechanic, really cool in terms of it's an aggressive mechanic, but doesn't. It's an aggressive mechanic that isn't always hyper aggressive. It's a snowbally mechanic that doesn't feel super snowbally. It's something that doesn't mean the format's necessarily super fast or super aggressive.
It
Eh,
rewards you for drafting well, like understanding where you are in the draft. Like there's risk reward with it, and like how many instances you have of it made it better. So you're willing to dip into less desirable cards potentially that still said ring tempts you on them. Like everything about the mechanic was balanced perfectly. I thought. I mean, like the blue red deck was maybe a little good in leagues, but it still wasn't broken in leagues. And I think
mhm.
just if in a pod, like was balanced super well. I think like the mechanic, obviously the color strength, not quite as balanced, but still fun decks to play in every color.
Yeah. What's your worst?
My worst, I have my honorable mention is battles, which we need to
Okay.
discuss.
Yeah.
My actual award winner is Discover. I flipping hate that mechanic with a fiery
Wow.
passion, like from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Just
Yeah.
like it just is completely uninteresting. It's completely random, and it's either on a reasonable Magic the Gathering card and totally busted, or on a garbage Magic the Gathering card and largely unplayable. Like there's no middle ground with it.
Yeah.
Like put it on a 3/2 with Geological Appraiser, great. Like one of the best cards in the set. Put it on Falter, like three things can't block, you're never casting that card. You know what I mean? Like there
Hmm.
just was I just everything about Discover rubbed me the wrong way completely in Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
You want to talk about battles?
I would like to talk about battles. I think I wish battles had been in a less powerful set. And not that they were the worst mechanic. I think battles were a cool idea. I think the implementation of them in March of the Machine just largely fell flat because of the other cards that were around them. So, for example, you mentioned your life total becoming 4, like something like Invasion of Amonkhet. Literally says 1 blue black, your life total becomes 4. Like, good luck playing defense. I'm going to win when I flip this battle. Versus, like, I thought there were a lot of other well designed battles that were reasonable, like Invasion of Mercadia, the red one that lets you loot, or even some of the fight ones in green, like there was a fight spell that flipped into a creature. But that ultimately, because of the power level of March of the Machine as a format, those weren't quite good enough to go after. But those should have been good enough to go after. You know what I mean? Like it was just very weird where the power level of battles slotted in with the overall power level of the aggregate cards in March of the Machine. So I thought in that implementation, there was kind of the worst in that, like, man, this could have been so cool. And it was still fine in March of the Machine, but I just thought they largely fell flat. Like, and I came in super high on them and kept moving them down and down, talked about them as one of my movers down because they just weren't, most of them weren't powerful enough to compete with the power level in March of the Machine, except if they said your life total becomes X. And there were, 5 to 10 of them that were that way. Invasion of the Amonkhet, I certainly think, was the biggest offender in that regard. But even those that were powerful weren't fun to play against. Like it was just so hard to give yourself any sort of wiggle room. We talk about cards like the 2 and a 3 drain 2 gain 2, like on a creature. like how much that swings the board in your favor to where it makes it difficult for your opponent to then think about attacking you because there's this life total disparity, right? When you play Invasion of Amonkhet and your life total becomes 4, like it's so hard for you to ever take an offensive role in that game of Magic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that really was, I think, the most egregious in terms of the battles, but they largely it's a really difficult, as I said, it's just a really difficult window. It's such a narrow window to design the card correctly to where it doesn't feel oppressive or like largely, inconsequential.
Right, but I think they did do a lot of them well in a different format. Like
Yeah.
the 4 and a green fight spell that gives a +1/+1 counter fights and then turns into a creature. Like that's a well designed card, and that should have been like good or play or could have been in a different format. Very good and very playable and worth going after and killing. If it's more about resources than just rate and power level. But like power level was so high in March of the Machine that just your average battle that looked like a reasonable 2-for-1 was not worth working towards because there were so many other ways to get power and efficiency.
Right. My worst mechanic of 2023 was roll tokens. I just found, when I think back to Wilds of Eldraine, I do think a lot about it's not often that I think back to a format and think of a mechanic falling flat, but I really do think of this mechanic as falling flat just in the context of the enchantment going to the graveyard thing mattering, not mattering at all. And I think I never really played with this in paper, but I would imagine this is pretty darn clunky to play with in paper. Like, and also to in terms of like tracking them, at least on Arena, you just like quickly glance and you're like, oh, there's the ward symbol or there's trample or whatever to like reclock it to shortcut them. I just think a pretty lackluster mechanic in my memory.
All right, that takes us on to limited archetypes. So many listed here.
Oh my God. Well,
Sorry.
why don't you go first, sir?
Okay, my number one has to be Blue White Bath Song from Lord of the Rings. It's my favorite, and I think was very powerful when drafted appropriately and piloted appropriately. I loved that deck, loved the Bath Song. That's got to be my number one.
My number one is also, I think, my favorite archetype. Not the best, but my favorite from the year. Red Black Sacrifice from March of the Machine.
You mean, excuse me, sir, you mean Red Black Gumption?
Red Black Gumption, Red Black Rectangles, whatever you want it to be. But yeah, Red Black Gumption from March of the Machine. Definitely hold a dear place in my heart.
Yeah, I can't believe you didn't call it Red Black Gumption. I also wrote Red Black Sacrifice on my list, and I was like, wait a second, this deck is not called Red Black Sacrifice, it's called Red Black Gumption. And I think that was just a cool archetype also for us as podcasters, content creators, to talk about a style of drafting or
Yeah.
a way of drafting or a way of almost a way of life, gumption.
Almost a way of life, indeed.
Some others to shout out. Loved Blue White Control from Wilds of Eldraine. Not blue white tapping, but blue white control. Just with like just turtle up, play your destroy target attacking creatures, play some collector's vaults. What? You want to say something here?
Well, it's just fun. Like you've named the same archetype from two different sets.
Yeah, it was better in Lord of the Rings.
My favorite was Blue White Turtle Town in Lord of the Rings. I also like doing it in Wilds of Eldraine. You couldn't
but
really
not as
do
much
it.
as Lord of the Rings.
Couldn't really do it in LCI as good, so I don't like that set very much. I liked it in one where it was artifacts, so that was pretty good. Sorry, go ahead.
No. That's exactly what I sound like. And I can't even push back against that. I also want to shout out to the frogs and dogs archetype from March of the Machine. The 1/2 that could flip into the 4/3, and then the Convoke, the 3/2 frog.
Halo Hopper.
Halo Hopper, baby. I thought that card deserved some love.
Frogs and dogs.
we also have to shout out Green White Legends from Lord of the Rings,
Yes.
like Great Hall of the Citadel Life. Like, this is a very cool, very unique archetype. Green White was not food; it was legends all along. The blue-red ring tempting archetype from Lord of the Rings, I thought was also just an incredibly fun archetype to pilot. And even in the mirrors, I think that's one of the things that kept Lord of the Rings feeling fresh and alive. At least, we talk about gameplay. I really loved piloting the blue-red ring tempting mirrors. up in High Mythic and Lord of the Rings as well. And then would be remiss, I think you already kind of mentioned this while you were making fun of me, if we did not shout out the Blue Artifacts deck from Phyrexia Obi-Wan.
I
That
agree.
deck was that deck was a very unique deck, and I think we were on it way earlier than everyone else, and
And
maybe
then
the only people that liked it. Also, in addition to being on it earlier than everyone else.
You, me, and Greg Hatch, I think, were the people who are like blue-white artifacts. That's the way to go. Yeah, well, your shout about green-white legends from LTR leads me to my worst, which is green-white food from LTR is my worst, with an honorable mention of blue-green mana value 5 from Wilds of Eldraine. Just like two things that did not happen. Like green-white food was a trap, full stop. If you were trying to do food matters, you were just going to get got by everyone doing ring tempting. And so then you got the power of that by harnessing Frodo and his legendary friends in the true green-white deck.
The true green-white deck. My worst, I have 5 archetypes here, all tied.
All time.
Blue-green Scry from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Blue-green Proliferate
Oh
from
no!
Phyrexia Obi-Wan.
Oh no!
Blue-green Transformed Permanents from March of the Machine. Blue-green mana value 5 or greater from Eldraine. Blue-green Explorer from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. No longer are we shouting out blue-green. Pour one out for blue-green.
Pour one out for blue-green.
Like, what happened this year?
Wow.
Pour one out.
That's rough.
Like, they were all, when I went through 17 lands, because I was pretty sure I was going to do this, they were all the bottom or second to last in every format. And also just that graph that was on Twitter, like, that just showed, like, man, pour one out for blue-green. Just did not get there.
That's a tough look. That's a tough look.
Tough look. Bad year to be blue-green in 2023. Yeah. Not a fine vintage.
All right. We've come to the end here, though I think it's pretty clear based on what we've chatted about where we're going to land here for best and worst draft format of the year.
Well, I mean, my best, clearly LTR spoiled it 2 minutes in. Sorry.
Yeah.
And my worst, I think, also clearly Lost Caverns of Ixalan. I've been pretty outspoken about how little I have enjoyed playing Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And some of it, I think a lot of it is just, I don't enjoy playing with the cards that are there. That's what I was kind of realizing. Like, as I was doing this outline, I love so many of the cards from Lord of the Rings. I think they're cool. I think they're unique. I like the play patterns with them. And I just don't like a lot of the cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Or the cards that I thought I was going to like didn't pan out to be good. And then also couldn't play with the things I wanted to play with. So, like, yeah, just all of that combined, I think, for me.
Yeah, I would have thought, like, well, maybe it's like reverse recency bias or something. But last year, the last set of the year was my favorite, which was Brothers War. And the year before that, the last set of the year, Vow was my favorite. So, like, it's not about that. But I also have LCI as the worst set. I think LCI might actually be the set I have played the least since starting the podcast. Like, I maybe drafted this for 3 weeks. I don't even think I made it a month. I was just like, well, I'll focus on Pioneer. Basically, like, if we didn't have to do an episode about LCI for the podcast that I had to prepare for, I just wasn't playing it.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well. I mean, I won't do another LCI draft until we do our 50 takes episode.
Yeah, you're going to be playing on Magic Excel, right?
I am going to be playing on Magic Excel and loving it. But yeah, and I think also should shout out Wilds of Eldraine, I think, as a great draft format. I think we were too hard on Wilds of Eldraine when it was happening. I do think it is a very much above average draft format. I also think I would just like to defend Phyrexia All Will Be One. I think that format got a lot of hate, and I really enjoyed Phyrexia All Will Be One. I thought which is weird because, like, you could say a lot of the same things like people would dislike about LCI would say they also dislike about Phyrexia All Will Be One, but I just felt like the rules were there in Phyrexia All Will Be One where everybody had to follow the rules. Like in LCI, blue-white just gets to win the early game and it gets to win the late game. Like in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Like,
but not necessarily in the same deck.
It's not very hard to have it all in the same deck. Like,
yeah.
to have a blue-white deck that's great early game and also is going to flip, clay fried bricks late in the game and give your team +1/+1 and make 2/2/2s and then flip whatever, the 4-4 machine. It's got a lot of inevitability as well while getting out some fast starts. So yeah, I love Phyrexia LB1. And I thought March of the Machine 2, like just a very groundbreaking set in terms of power level. New
Well,
card type, like a lot to be said there. So maybe your take that this is a great year for Limited is not that far off base.
I,
LCI is a pretty big a black eye, I think, for the year of Limited, though.
I totally agree. And going into LCI, I was like, if LCI is at least better than WoW, which at the time was my least favorite set of the year, but I think I would probably now, I would rank the sets. So I haven't said what my best is, but it is March of the Machine, which
Oh,
I think is actually my goat. Still is my goat set. Full stop.
wait, just number one?
Yeah. I said this at the end of
Whoa.
when March was here. Look, the reprint of the companions plus the Gumption deck, like it's just hard for me to not have that set be the reigning champ for me. Those are two of my favorite things to do in Limited for sure. But I would rank the sets March 1, probably Woe 2, LTR 3. I
Oh.
didn't love Lord of the Rings, buddy. I'm sorry. I thought it was fine. I was not as obsessed with it as you.
Oof.
And then I'd have 1 4th, and then LCI 5th, pretty steeply in 5th. But I think I would have you go back and think about the quote unquote, like when you go back to other years, my path was I saw one set a year that I was like, that's pretty good. And the rest I was like, I never need to touch that again. And I think you might feel the same way.
I think if I were to rank them, it would be Lord of the Rings 1, March of the Machine 2, Wilds 3, and then 1, 4,
1 and
LCI
then
5.
LCI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
makes sense.
surprised. I thought you felt similarly about Lord of the Rings to me.
I did not, because I didn't have I didn't love the baths. Like you have your whole
Right.
bath song journey,
Right.
which is very important to you.
It is very
We had
important to me.
then we had our Great Hall Legends together.
Yeah.
You had your Lorien revealed love affair. Like you have there's a lot of you cards in that set. And I'm by proxy very happy because it's rare that you feel joy discussing Magic cards. And so when that happens, it makes me quite happy. But I didn't have the same sort of like affinity for cards and archetypes in that set as you did.
Yeah. And like the blue red ring tempting was just fine for you, or
Yeah.
blue red spells. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was the only decks I didn't like were like the data decks, like black red or whatever in that format.
You have to stop this. What do you mean the data decks?
Listen, while we're talking about it, I was retrospecting about this.
Uh-huh. What?
My anti-data stance, my
Uh-huh.
petitions against data bit, my shtick. I think it's great for our podcast. Like
I agree. No,
nobody needs data read to them on a podcast, and I think we pepper in a very appropriate amount of data from you, and I think that the rest is entertaining for me.
I think no, I really do think because so I actually think you in your brain and in your heart have swung too far. The pendulum has swung too far towards hating data because I do think you, Ben, the player who wants to be good at Magic and like at the best Magic player they can be, is leaving some equity on the table. But as your partner in podcasting crime, I think it is excellent for the brand and excellent for content. And I also agree, like, there's plenty, if you want people to pour over the data / to actually like make sense of it in a meaningful way, there are people out there who are way more qualified to do that than us. So
Yes.
what we're going to do is keep bringing our own experiences and retrospectives and analyses to bear. And that's going to be me looking at 17 lands sometimes and trying to figure it out, and Ben telling me where I can stuff it, So it's going to be good.
And on that note, I think a great way to wrap up 2023. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
Thank you so much to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this podcast. If you're heading over there, and you should be heading over there for any and all purchases, please use checkout code LOL when you do to let them know we sent you there, and more importantly, to get 5% off of anything you purchase. You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. You know what I'm very excited about for lordsoflimited.com is we're going to have a new front page picture of our new
Ooh,
live show.
from the live stage?
Because that's what our picture is now on the website, is us doing the live pod from Vegas in 2019. We're going to get a new one here, live from the main stage of MagicCon Chicago. There'll be more than just pictures of me and Ben on our website as well. There's links to our YouTube, links to our Twitch, tier lists, episode backlog, merch from TeePublic, all of that on our website.
We also do not shout out the YouTube channel enough, I don't think. We probably need to start doing that at the front of the episode. If you're not tuning into YouTube, youtube.com/@lordsoflimited, there's video versions of the podcast every week that Ethan is painstakingly editing, and you should be checking it out over there if you like YouTube content as well as like usually a draft video a week or so. You know, we've been doing some high stakes draft vids. You chop those up, you put them on YouTube. So if YouTube content is your jam, you should be following youtube.com/@lordsoflimited.
Thank you. Shill for our content, please.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for listening. We're really looking forward to a hype 2024, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.